Bonjour. Goedemorgen. Good morning. I have you for the next hour, the whole hour. So we're going to cover three things. The first will be some of the trends that are shaping our world as it pertains to work. And then we're going to focus on what it might mean to you as an individual. But I'd like to start off with the link between work and our lives. And to do that, if you could all stand up, please. You can tell we're not in the private sector. They would have been up in 2 seconds. It's going to be a lot faster today, my friends. Oi, oi, oi. Okay. Shake a leg a little bit. Okay, I'd like you to think of a ladder. And this is the ladder of life. 10 represents the highest rung of the ladder and is the best possible life you could imagine for yourself. 0 is the bottom rung of the ladder and represents the worst possible life you could imagine for yourself. I'd like you to answer 2 questions. The first is, on which of the rung do you currently stand? And the second question is, on which rung do you think you'll stand in 5 years' time? So again, 10, the best possible life you could imagine, 0, the worst possible life you could imagine for yourself. Thinking only of now, if you score between 0 and a 4, please sit down. It's good working for the EU, huh? Okay. If you score a 5 or a 6, please sit down. A 7. An 8. Wow. A 9. Okay, we need the names of these 5 people because drinks and dinner are on you tonight. So thank you. Okay, please sit down. Okay, so what is this? Gallup has been asking a representative sample of the Earth's population. So really about 96% of the world is somehow represented in this sample. Every year for a decade, this question. And they're trying to find out how we rate our lives. And what some of the data shows is, if you score now between a 0 and a 4, and you don't think it will be better in 5 years' time, you're in the suffering category. And across the world, about 13% of people, so what, about 1.5 billion people, identify themselves through this methodology as suffering. If you score now a 5 or a 6, and again, you don't think it will be better in 5 years' time, you're in the struggling category. And across the world, that is most people. Something like 63% of people are there. But if you score now a 7, and in 5 years' time you think it's going to be an 8 or more, you're in the thriving category. And that's when most things in life are working for you. Most things are happening kind of as you hoped it would. Now, the truth is there's a very strong correlation between per capita GDP and the way you score this. If you are desperately poor, it's hard to get out of some misery around this. There is one region around the world where if you look at per capita GDP, mortality rates, unemployment, you'd think that a lot of people would be suffering, but they're not. So their feeling, the way they experience life, is much better than some of the hard outcomes would show. Which part of the world do you think it is? Well, let's be sure. Which part of the world is it absolutely not? Absolutely not Europe. So where could it be? Where the joie de vivre is much higher than you might think. Very good, very good. Country like Brazil, 1, 2, 3% of people say that they're in the struggling category. You look at outcomes, you think it's crazy. There's a nice energy there. Okay, so this is how we rate our lives. At the same time, Gallup asks another 100 questions about everything. So, were you anxious yesterday? Why? Were you happy? What were you doing? In the last 30 days, have you been hungry on 3 or more occasions? What do you want for your children? Safety. Do you feel comfortable in the place that you live? Trying to get a sense not only how we rate our lives, but how we experience our lives by trying to reenact that which was closest to you. So yesterday, last week, last month. And from that, 5 things emerge with incredible regularity across the world as being at the heart of a great life. Number 1 is enjoying what you do and doing something interesting or learning something interesting. So of all the data that we're looking at, that is number one, is do you enjoy what you do every day? Now, of course, you could be taking care of children, you could be a pensioner, but for the purposes of today's discussion, it's of course about work. So if you enjoy what you do at work every day, the chances that you're enjoying your life are that much higher, 2 to 3 times higher. If you're engaged at work, the chances that you are thriving in your overall life are 2 to 3 times higher. Those are crazy odds. Just quickly for reference, 2 is social. And it's the time we spend with people we love and hopefully love us back, friends, family. People with very high social well-being say they spend up to 6 hours a day with friends or family. If you work full-time, how do you get to 6 hours a day? Louder, louder when you speak, please. Social media, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You better have friends at work. If you don't like the people you work with, not only is it that work piece is not happening, but that social piece that we have, a very basic human need as social animals, will not be fulfilled. 3 is financial. And what you see is if you're outside of extreme poverty, the bigger thing here is stability of earnings, knowing where your money is coming 1, 2, 3 years down the line, rather than overall earnings. There is an argument that the extra stress that chasing money brings you is not worth it when you look at the way people experience their lives. Again, you have to be over a certain level. 4th is physical. And the amazing piece here in the data is that if people can get to most of what they want to do every day, even if they have a sickness, a handicap, they can live a very fulfilling and great life. It's when it gets in the way of what you're trying to do, then of course that becomes number 1. And then finally, maybe the difference between a good and a spectacular life is community. So are you involved with something bigger than your immediate self, even your immediate family? So do you volunteer? Do you give blood? Are you involved with something around your town, your village, your neighborhood? Anything that's bigger than their immediate family and friends seems to be that final piece that makes a really great life. Okay, but so for today's discussion, it's all about enjoying what you do every day. So this work piece. Actually, how do I get my slides moving? Here. I had a nice ladder I wanted to show you. There's the ladder. Okay, so, but here's the problem. Gallup uses a methodology, just 12 questions, trying to find out if people are engaged at work. And they identify 3 strands: engaged, not engaged, and actively disengaged. And there's, some Anglo-Saxon bias to it. There is more data from the United States, but still, they get a lot of data from companies and also from representative samples of populations. So it's a pretty good, it's like 30 million people have replied to this over the years. So it's not a bad way to look at how people are experiencing work. And when you look at this, even though work is so important to people, most people's experience of work is pretty mediocre. So most people around the world feel they could contribute so much more if somebody would listen to them, if they had a chance to focus on their strengths, if they had the right equipment to get their job done, and probably most important, if they had a half-decent manager. Okay? So from all of the research we have, the #1 driver of people's engagement at work is their boss. So when you have a lousy boss, it's really hard to make it up with pay and conditions, even what you're doing. It'll take you so far, but a lousy boss, as I'll show you in a moment, is a real killer. So this is both for individual performers and for managers. Around the world, 13% of people are fully engaged, so can give of everything that they want to give at work. Okay? Then you have this big group of over 60%, about 65%, kind of in the middle, not engaged. You try hard, you come in with best intentions, but you're not hitting. It's just not happening for you. You feel unfulfilled. Your productivity is not as high as it could be. You don't get to your customers in the way that you'd like to. And then finally, there's this nearly 1 in 4 people who are actively disengaged, who kind of would prefer to do anything but work at the place they are. It's really kind of shitty. It's that bad. And 1 in 4. Now, there are big differences across the world. So in the United States, for instance, 31% of people are engaged at work. Europe, it's 12%. France, it's lower than the European average. I think the Germans say that God lives in France. God doesn't work in France. This is, yes, very, very sad to say. Okay, so we know that work is so important to people, but that the majority of people, at least according to this data, have so much more they could contribute, but are being held back. Let's look a little bit more at this management piece, this engagement piece. So why is it so important to get this right? So engagement is really down to two things. It's cognitive vigilance, so you care. You care about your job, your customer, your team, the European Commission. You know, there's some kind of something in you that drives you to care. You're involved. You have a stake, skin in the game. The other piece is emotional attachment. And typically, emotional attachment is to other people. It's hard to have emotional attachment to a desk or an emblem, or there's something there, but over time, it tends to be to people. And so if you look at that, this cognitive vigilance, emotional attachment, the boss, the manager, has a big sway and say in this. There's this really funny piece of research that was done with a very sexy group of people. Male British civil servants. Women go crazy when they think of that, typically. Okay. But this group, it was a study of thousands of male British civil servants over, I think it was 8 or 9 years, looking at health outcomes. And they looked at everything. So gender, it was men. You know, their diet, did they take exercise, socioeconomic background. They try to factor in as many things as possible into their overall piece. And what they found at the end of this is male British civil servants who had a horrible boss, so were unfair, withheld information, never gave praise, really just hopeless, had a 30% greater likelihood of having a heart attack. So think about that. If you don't have a serious ailment, a serious disease, who your boss is, if that boss is your boss for many years, has a bigger impact on your health than your doctor. Okay? I mean, it's crazy. Think of this. Again, some Gallup research. One of the questions that is asked in that big poll of the world is, in the last 30 days, on 3 or more occasions, did the stress of work make you behave inappropriately with your friends and family? So I remember when I first saw that question, I think, sometimes I'm not listening to my kids, I'm not with them, because I'm thinking about work. So 3 or more occasions that you were an ass with your family because of the stress of work. People who are engaged, let me look at my numbers here, 14% of people say yes. So even when you're engaged, 14% say yes. When you're not engaged, now 24% of people say yes. And if you're actively disengaged, it goes up to 34%. So you see directly how what's going on at work just follows you home if it's not working out well. And a big part of that, for good or bad, is the boss. So if you are a boss, if you are a manager of people, if you're going to become one at some point, the influence that you have on people's lives, let alone productivity in work, is crazy. Okay. A little piece on productivity, because if we look at the last 15 years, it's one of the very difficult things of the West, this includes the United States, is low productivity growth. And my friends, what does high productivity lead to? You translators, sorry. Guys, high productivity is how you get a salary increase. That's how we become richer. You know, the world until the Industrial Revolution had no productivity increases. So more people would grow, we'd eat all the food there is, more people would die, and we'd start again. We never got anywhere. And the whole thing about the Industrial Revolution is now suddenly 10 of us can be more productive, and we can create more and more. It's really a wonderful way to drive growth and so that people are wealthier, there's more money to spend on social services, on health, and productivity growth has been moribund even before the Great Recession in the West. So it's really a difficult time. Now, one part of productivity growth is human. I'm not even saying it's the majority. It's the piece I think is the most sexy, but it's one part of productivity growth. And typically, the things that drive productivity growth in the human factor is health. So, are you kept healthy? In the UK, for instance, it's the National Health Service. The other is education, and particularly schooling. So before you get to university is, just how able are we? What are our skills and knowledge? The other one is on-the-job training. So something that's very strong in parts of Northern Europe, Germany, the Netherlands, apprenticeships. And then finally, and often misguided, is this whole piece around engagement. So just how well you are managed. And people who are highly engaged versus those who are, it's terrible at work, there's a 20% productivity gap. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. The world is looking to eke out 1, 2, 2.5% productivity growth a year. If you are well managed, if you feel in the right frame of mind, what you do in 4 days, so you finish Thursday, so I'm guessing here 3:30. Other people have to finish Friday 3:30. Okay, a whole extra day of work just to get what you engaged people have done. That is crazy wasted energy by not having people being at their best at work. And this is one thing where I think Europe has to think also about the United States. So in the most productive countries in Europe, productivity is as or slightly higher than the United States. Kind of sweet countries like Luxembourg, but even Germany, France to a degree, have high productivity levels. The Nordic countries that compare are slightly ahead of the United States. But Americans also work longer hours. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but in terms of high productivity, and they work higher hours. And overall, their engagement is twice that of the average European worker. Okay? So they have certain benefits which are very difficult to compete against. Now, in the best countries in Europe, so largely in Northern Europe, some of the things that drive human productivity, so up until you're 18, 19 years old, are overall better here than in the United States. So universal health coverage, tertiary education. But once you get into work, you go to university, the United States comes into its own. And the big thing that we'd say to Europeans is the hard stuff, the investments of generations has been done. Okay. Education, healthcare, that's really hard to get going in a number of years. It's over decades. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. To be poorly managed, to not be productive and engaged at work is a crying shame. We let our forefathers down on that. And the United States will kick our butt side if we can't get that right. That was my piece there. Okay. And by the way, I may have a strange accent, but I'm very European. Swedish father, Greek mother, Holland, the UK, and my heart has been broken since last June. It can't mend. Okay. What are some of the trends, if we look into the world, that might be interesting is, I think some of the most interesting have been identified by the World Economic Forum. And three things that they talked about is, one is it's likely that disruptions happening in jobs will affect which gender the most, boys or girls? Girls keep getting it on the head. So you come into the workforce, and when we disrupt it for you. So it's never going to be easy for women. But if you look at the jobs that are most likely to be open to disruption, it is work where women are involved. The second is the huge value on human skills. So if they're trying to look into the future and something that is transportable, that you can take to different industries, to different jobs, it seems to be something around the way you collaborate, the way you influence, the way you get along with other people. And then finally, and I think this is very exciting, is the rise of mass entrepreneurship. And we'll talk about this in a moment. But here I want you to do a little exercise. Hope this will work. So think for a moment. Do you have the skills to succeed in the next 25 years? If I look at some of you in the room, it's probably more like 50 years. The second thing is, what about what your children should be studying now in order to stay current in 50 years? Think about that, 50 years from now. Do you have any idea what you would tell your children to be ready for that? Take 2 minutes to discuss amongst yourselves in groups of 3, please. Let's go. Don't look at me. Talk with one another, please. Okay. That was some lively debate. Not everybody was involved in the debate, but still good. How difficult is that? Just how difficult is it to get that right, to predict that? And the truth is, I think I know a little bit about this area. Gallup knows a little bit about this area. The chances are like throwing up a coin. Whatever we say now is actually going to come out. So think about what happened to watchmakers or people that made cameras. Could you see that coming with a darn phone? What about the other side? Is it kind of strange that a lot of us still really like to read hard copy, hard books that didn't quite go the way it goes? It's so difficult to predict trends. So when you're trying to think about what can ring fence your job, your career, your vitality, and to stay current and meaningful and relevant, okay, you've really got to dig deep. What are some of the things that you can do? Because trying to bet and guess on trends is fool's gold. Nobody knows. And whoever claims is all the sillier for it. We just don't know. My friends, in the last 2 weeks, I was in London, I live there, Barcelona, and Amsterdam. And what's really pissing locals off? What is really pissing Dutch people in Amsterdam, so-called Spaniards in Barcelona, and half the population in London, which is still British? How crazy is that? It's saving the South right now. It's the only thing Greece has going for itself right now. 14 million tourists last year. Okay, it's the lifeblood, and it's pissing people off now in the North. What's going to happen? Who knows? It's impossible to predict trends. So try and think about what you're going to do. Very interesting. And we will try. We'll give it a try. Okay, please stand if you're a freelancer, if you're part of the exciting gig economy. Look at this. And you see all ages. Very nice. Thank you. So that's what, 25% of the room? Something like that. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so what's happening with the gig economy? Because I think this is an important one. Let me show you some of the numbers. So first of all, some research by Deloitte. It found that internationally, when executives, so leaders of large organizations, were asked about what's happening, what are your future plans for freelancers, over half of them agreed or strongly agreed they would be using more freelancers into the future. Okay? Again, that's a huge call. That's a trend that's just going to accelerate. Look at some of the data out of the United States. This is from Edelman. Get this right. 1/3 of American workers, hard-working American workers, do more than one job. Okay? That's 55 million people. Okay? Still the engine of the world. 55 million Americans are in the gig economy. And then maybe the most interesting of all is, if you look at the international data, again, this is from Edelman, in 2014, just over half of freelancers said it was a choice they were making. So still the majority, it was set upon them. Now it's over 63% of people who identify themselves as gig workers, freelancers, are saying it's a choice. It's where they want to go. Guys, from an organizational point of view, why do you hire freelancers? So you can fire them. Okay, so one piece there is, you can see we're in the heart of Europe. In the States, flexibility. But so flexibility, speed, and lower fixed costs. Yes. What else? Good stuff. Skills, innovative skills. So new technology. These people are up with things that maybe your own workforce isn't. Okay, what else? What else is good? Active. Meaning? Dynamic. Yes, yeah. There's no pussyfooting about. You have to work for a living every day. So nice one, very active. What else? The positive stuff, why you need freelancers.
Outsiders, without involvement in politics and all this stuff that goes on in big organizations.
Very nice. So outside perspective, and not just outside perspective, so non-political, also maybe from other organizations. They can bring best practices through your door. But the final thing that I'd say, which is so important, is the rise of millennials. Because more and more of this lovely generation want to work for themselves. That thing that the World Economic Forum raised as mass entrepreneurialism, this difficult word, they want more and more of that. So there's a big demand. look at that data now. 63% of freelancers, it's a choice. Okay, so still many examples where it's not, but the majority now, it's a choice. So, I'd like you to get up, please, and find new friends, 3 new friends, people that you don't know well. You have 1 minute to find them and to introduce yourself. And guys, your starting was so slow, so this has got to be a lot faster. The minute starts now. Go. Speed dating. Oh my gosh. Lead by example. New friends. Okay, everybody. Excuse me. You'll have more chance for this. With your new friends, it's time for an exercise. Excuse me, with your new friends. Excuse me. I've unleashed the beast here. Guys, so with your new friends. Hi, nice to meet you. Hello, everybody. So stay with your new friends. But I have to ask you to do something. Okay. Okay, for 2 minutes. Alsjeblieft, please, for 2 minutes with your new friends, what are the top 3 characteristics that come to mind when you think of millennials? Top 3 characteristics when you think of millennials. Discuss with your new friends. 2 minutes now, please. $10:30, 1 hour. 1 hour, man. Okay, I won't do one of the exercises. Yeah, okay. Yes. Okay, I'll do it. Okay, everybody. 2 minutes is up. Share what you came up with. So the top 3 characteristics that spring to mind when you think of millennials. And you can stand when you speak. So who goes first? Top 3 characteristics that you came up. Let's do it at speed. So please. Technology savvy. What else? Social involvement. Flexibility. Individualistic. Open-minded. Sorry? Selfish. Okay. Here, what was here? High expectations. Confused.
Dynamic.
I couldn't hear.
Dynamic.
Courageous.
Experience.
Courageous. Practical? Tactical, okay. Practical, okay.
Entitled.
Entitled, okay. All right, I have to stop you. That's good. It's good it's coming through, okay. All right. Well, here's some research that Gallup has done. So first of all, this Pew research shows that in 3.5 years, 50% of the global workforce will be people born after 1980, kind of then to the early 2000s, so the millennial generation. Of course, because the population is bigger than ever, it'll be the biggest ever generation. So it's coming at a movie house next to you like you have no idea. 2025, 75% of the world's working population. Okay, so the game is done, the goose is cooked, it's millennials. And this generation, I think, is different. It really is different. Let's look at 4 things which summarize, I think, what you've said. So the first is, of course, they're unattached. So they're unattached to employers, they're unattached to brands. It's a lot harder to win their loyalty. Some might say it's harder to win their love in relationships, but I won't go there. It's just about, as an organization, you've got to work that much harder to keep them, for them to thrive. The second, of course, is they're wired. They're wired to the world. They know what's going on. So whereas before maybe we could have gotten away with sweeping it under the carpet, it's impossible with this generation. They know. They know a lot about everything. No, they know about everything a little bit. That's what I wanted to say. Okay. The thing that I really like, and it's to the point that came there about courage, is they're unconstrained. So they will challenge the status quo. And if you want to look at organizations that thrive, people that thrive, it's that ability to challenge, to take risks, which is huge. And this generation has that in spades, much more than my generation, where we think lots of these things, but we keep it in our kidneys. And 20 years later, we're still there. Okay? Millennials are different. And that's a very exciting one for organizations if you get it right. And then finally, they're idealistic-ish. So the truth is, the biggest currency for millennials is to learn and grow. If I'm learning and growing, you can keep me. You can keep my attention. Don't talk to me about car and pay package. All of that is good. But if I'm not learning and growing, I will not stay. Okay? The other side of this, though, is it's always learning and growing and what's in it for me. So trying to also express the beauty of mastery and what that can mean for your team, for your organization, is sometimes a little difficult. But think of these numbers. Across the world, 12–13% of people are engaged. 29% of millennials are. So straight away when they come into the workforce, there's an energy which you can just harness, double the general working population. If you look at 2 things that they really need, so this freewheeling, lovely population, somebody here said confused. So 29% of millennials are engaged. If a manager holds them accountable, okay, now 60% of millennials are engaged. These are crazy numbers. 13% the world, 29% millennials, 60%. And if a manager helps them set goals, suddenly they go up to 72% are engaged. So yes, freewheeling, but struggle with priorities, need attention and focus. Guys, people of my generation, you get recognition maybe once a year, once every 2 years. Okay? How often do millennials need a catch-in, a catch-up, to be at their best? Very good. Forget yearly. At the very best, it's daily. Less than a week, you suck as a manager. That's a different world, a different piece to be looking at. Okay, so the rise and rise of millennials. All of us want what millennials want. The difference is, the last time a millennial changed job, they changed the organization, 93%. Okay, so really, if it's not happening for me, I will leave, which is very different to other generations. I think we all want what they want, but they're intolerant of lousy conditions, hopeless management. Okay. So, our next question to you guys is, what do we need from leaders? So to be at our best, so again, if you are a leader now or you want to be one in the future, reams and reams of data that we've studied over time, it shows really 4 things. And the first is trust. So you got to trust your leader, and the best way of showing it is when they trust you, when they give you autonomy to operate. People who trust their leaders, there's a better than 1 in 2 chance they're engaged at work. Anything but a 5 on that, so fully agree, it falls to 1 in 12. It's nearly binary. The second, and often forgotten, is compassion. So we need to feel cared for. I'd even use sometimes the word loved, but it doesn't always work in places like Brussels. But this is what you need, is real attention, real friendship, and an understanding of your context, your family life, what you're after, as well as work. The third is stability, and a lot of this is around financial stability. So this is something that is, of course, to the benefit of working for the EU. It is also consistency of leadership behaviors. And then finally, maybe the higher order, the piece that we need most from leaders is what? So you've got the trust in place. Sorry? Purpose. So it's woven into purpose, but it's even bigger. What could it be? Vision. It's hope. So remember that question I asked you when we opened, how do you rate your life now? And where do you think it'll be in 5 years' time? The kicker there is hope. So in non-war zones, countries with the lowest well-being, rated well-being, is Bulgaria and Greece. And it's not just that stuff is hopeless now, they don't think it's going to get better. So Greece, because of 8 years of implosion, and Bulgaria because of corruption. And that's the killer, is when it's okay if you're in a mess, as long as you know that it's going to be better in the future. When you don't, it leads to despair. And this happens not just at a country level, but within a team. You always have to have hope that things will be better, or even better, into the future. Okay. A quick one for you. You only have a minute for this. Discuss to the person next to you. Think about a time that you really grew, when you've grown the most. What happened? Why was it? When you have grown the most. It could be family life, school, or at work. But when you have grown the most, why? What happened? 1 minute now. Okay, I have to stop you there. What was the underlying theme when you have grown the most? What was the underlying theme?
When you're pushed out of your comfort zone.
Pushed out of your comfort zone. A star, we stop there. That's what I was looking for. Okay. If there's one big thing I would say to succeed and be relevant in 10, 15, 20, 25 years, you must take risks, calculated risks. But without risk, it's very difficult to keep growing and to stay relevant. And I think this, if you look at the trends, becomes more and more true. And it's difficult, but the more you can go out of your comfort zone, try new things. It might be in your area of expertise, but go deeper, faster. Try it with different people. Take on a more important assignment. But the more you can do that, I think the chances that you stay relevant are high. People who don't take risks, it's going to be harder and harder. And I even say this for middle-class white males, who, let's face it, have made lovely careers by not taking risks in the past, by being white, middle-class, and male. I think that currency is changing. Not as fast as it should, but it is. And for the rest of us, you've got to find other ways. Take risks. The other one that I'd say is, Focus on what you're really good at. So this was a really cool study that was done in 1955. A school in Lincoln, Nebraska, in the United States. Beyond. Yeah, I can't even tell you. Okay, and they were actually trying to look at different ways of teaching kids speed reading. But it was a failed experiment and something else came out. What they found was average readers read 90 words a minute. And following training, that went up to 150. But they found there was another dash of kids who before training could read 350 words a minute. What happened to those kids after training? My God. Okay, so that's an 800% increase, okay? The most important thing that I could tell you, trying to be relevant into the future, is focus on what you are really good at or you have a chance of being really good at, okay? There's explosive upside. If you focus on your weaknesses, you'll only ever get to mediocre performance. To be really good, focus on your strengths. So what do you do if you have weaknesses, though? I have to speed through these because of time. First of all, think if it's a critical weakness. So for instance, if you're a translator and you're not very good at accounting, partner with someone else, get someone else to do it. That's not a critical weakness. Who gives a hoot? Find out if it's critical or not. The next piece I'd say is, look, is it knowledge or skills? Because those, of course, you can change through experience, doing stuff, reading, whatever it may be. The problem is when it's innate. So if you need courage in somebody or discipline in someone and you don't have it, my friends, by the time you're in your young 20s, it's very hard to learn that. We don't change that much. We like to think we do, but we don't. Try to focus on what you're really good at. And the stuff that you're not so good at, don't fix your weaknesses. Think of contingency plans. So, create a support system. Maybe the other piece is compensate with a strength. My favorite, find a complementary partner. It's the heart of a good life and great work. It leads to engagement. You're good at this, I'm rubbish at it. Let's partner. And then finally on this as well is, for bosses, it's a lot easier to adjust somebody's role than their human nature. So if this person's not really strategic, but they activate like crazy, let me take some of those pieces away. They can really play to that. To make somebody strategic who isn't, good luck. And then finally, and this is where we'll end, take 2 minutes here to think of a leader who is vital to get on side. So this could be a big boss. If you're one of the contingent workers, it's somebody you need to influence to continue working. But think about this boss that's really important that you're struggling with. And think then also, what is their style? What grabs their attention? Who breaks through to them? How, why, and when? What are their priorities? And what do they expect from you? And you have 90 seconds starting now. Go. Share with one another the boss, what's happening, and how you might overcome it. I have to stop you here. Hopefully one for further discussions. So my friends, in summary, it's very hard to predict the future. There's all sorts of exciting things happening, but how do you stay relevant and current within that? It's impossible to predict with any exact knowledge or skills around it. The 3 things I'd recommend, though, is continuously challenge yourself. Take risks, maybe calculated risks, but never stop. When you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and even older, it'll keep you vital, it'll probably keep you relevant. If you don't, the chances are you will stagnate. You won't continue to grow. The second piece is try and use your strengths. And when you're not using your strengths, think why. Am I not clear about my expectations? Do I have a horrible boss? Guys, and if it's a horrible boss, don't hold around too long. You can learn sometimes how not to do things, but a really horrible boss, if you've got options, run. Just get out of that. It's a bad situation. Okay? And then the third one is, I do think the currency of modern leadership, of getting stuff done, is influencing. Authority is less and less interesting. It means very little to millennials, and good for them. Okay? The way you get people on side is sway them. Doing good work is not enough. You've got to do good work that becomes famous. And to do that, you need to influence continuously. I hope you have a lovely 1.5 day ahead of you. Thank you very much.